we've had a heavy Russian cargo plane landing in the region carrying what appears to be aid for Venezuela. So, like, things in the region are heating up. Things are not looking good. We're almost certain, I mean, not almost certainly, we're certainly going to go to war. Now, someone who knows far more than me about this is our guest, Dan Ditso. Now, this is a friend of my channel, longtime friend of the channel, have been on a few debates together, and a longtime advocate for democracy and civil rights in the region of Latin America broadly. So, whenever you're ready, Dan Ditso, welcome to the show. Go.
Hola, Visora, pura vida.
Today?
Let me just put this here real quickly. It's been falling off, but that's so people know where I'm actually from. Well, thank you for having me, Visora, and hopefully we're gonna have.
Thank you for coming back on so that we can talk without 30-second delays like the last time I had you on.
Like last time. So. If I may, let me introduce myself so people have a perspective on this. I'm 44 years old. I am a political analyst as well as a political operator more than activist. I operate in politics. I am half Costa Ricense from Costa Rica and half Venezuelan. I mean, my mother is from Costa Rica. My father, who's now deceased, almost 10 years now, was from Venezuela. So I have both nationalities. I have both cultures. Something that is important to the note is that I'm actually adopted by this couple. Because when I was born in Costa Rica, I was born to a mother who was under extreme poverty, who had 4 kids before me, who those kids were taken away. So there's a whole story right there. But anyhow, I have lived in this 44 years of life. I have lived throughout all the Western Hemisphere, from Canada down to Argentina, plus some areas in Caribbean. So basically, by the age of 16, I had already lived in 6 different countries, which were, well, mainly my 2 bases, Venezuela and Costa Rica. I had lived in Mexico, Argentina, United States, Ecuador, and then, well, my parents divorced, and I returned back to Costa Rica when I was 16. So politically,
and you even got me beat.
Yeah. And just to give that overview, my father, all his adult life, he worked in politics. When he adopted me, he was an ambassador of Venezuela. And the reason we lived in the United States is he was appointed by the government of Carlos Andrés Perez. No, that was Lucinchi. I'm sorry. It was the Lucinchi government and then Carlos Andrés Perez to represent Venezuela permanently for at least 5-6 years in the Organization of American States, which is seated in Washington, D.C. So. That's an overview of who I am and what I do. So
very qualified, more qualified than anyone in our government talking about this for sure.
Yeah, I just look. A few hours ago, there was this panel, North American Anglo-speaking panel about this, and let me tell you how disappointed I was, because they had no clue. Those against or in favor of intervention in Venezuela had no clue what the hell they were speaking. So let me put this very simple. Let's call out the lies of Donald Trump in regard to Venezuela. First, I'm going to be very clear. I am opposition of the current regime in Venezuela. I have been so since day one, but there's a reasoning why. Because I, at the age of 13, 14, I lived in 92, the second attempt of Chavez in Caracas of the coup against Carlos Andrés Perez. And at that age, my father told me, if they win you must be ready to help us defend this family because they will come for me. They didn't win. Chavez was sent to prison for 6 years and then pardoned by Rafael Caldera, the last president of the Fourth Republic in Venezuela. So I lived through that. I lived through the change of 99, 98, when Chavez was pardoned by Rafael Caldera and then was able to go into the elections and with his MVR movement, which actually people don't realize that, but the Movimiento Quinta República, or the Fifth Republic movement, was the original movement that Chavez led into what has happened in the last 25 years in Venezuela. So to understand that, you have to understand the history of Venezuela. To understand how all these things happened, you have to understand the realities of Venezuela. And to people out there, maybe it's like, what do you mean a Fifth Republic? Well, Venezuela has had 5 iterations since the independence of 1821, 5 different republics. And funnily enough, the Third Republic was called the United States of Venezuela.
That is funny. Well, to be fair, like, you're talking about, like, Westerners who, like, most Americans don't even know that, like, America has had 2 republics. We just watched the death of the Second Republic, in fact.
We're living through the death of the Second Republic, one could say, in that sense, and heading into, hopefully, a Third Republic, but those type of things are very interesting to analyze. But so to give that perspective, I want to run real quickly on this. There has been 5 iterations of republics in Venezuela. For the past 200 and almost 40 years of independent life of Venezuela as a Western country, as a Western Hemisphere country, Venezuela had different moments where political violence, instability after the exposing the Spanish, etc., were a constant systematic. But it's nothing different from the United States, because in the United States, by the 90th year, within the 90th year of their own independence, they went into a civil war. So those volatile situations that were happening in the Western Hemisphere, particularly from, I would say, early 1800s or 1800s up till the beginnings of last century, were growing pains of democracy, were the growing pains of constructing an independent republic. And we all had them, from Canada down to Argentina and the Caribbean. There's no avoidance in that sense. So in the situation of Venezuela, by the time the Third Republic died and the turn of century started happening, we start seeing the influence of what was happening throughout the world. First World War, the upheaval of what the hell just happened on the First World War, the whole situation of the birth of the fascists, but not only that, the start of the hegemonic control of the United States over the whole situation of the world.
And especially like Latin America as well, because that kicked off almost immediately after World War II.
Pretty much it kicked off right on at the end of World War II. Best example, one of the people think about the Cuban Revolution, but before the Cuban Revolution, you had an interesting example in Costa Rica, the Revolution of '49. It happened at least 3 years prior to Cuba, and that set the reality of the current Second Republic that we're living under in Costa Rica. So this whole context that I want to give is to understand why we have reached to this point of today. So in very bottom line, post-war, Venezuela suffered a second military regime under the control of a three men in power, which were Pérez Jiménez, Chalbut, who had given a coup against Romulo Gallegos, and this is where my family's
essentially.
Yeah, this is where my family story kicks in, because my father was exiled because he was working as a private secretary for Romulo Gallego at that time. He was probably, what was he, about 30 years old. So anyhow, he gets exiled and he comes to Costa Rica. Funnily enough, my uncle, who's the brother of my father, married my aunt, who's the sister of my mother. So two sisters married two brothers. That story happened way before I was born, but that story marked a lot of my upbringing. Knowing that your father was a political exile that then, after the end of Pérez Jiménez on 58, returned and was responsible for building the democracy or rebuilding the democracy on the Fourth Republic on that period.
I just want to cut in here for a second. I think that this right here is such an important point that a lot of people who don't have heritage that comes from a country that isn't a beacon of democracy and has been for like a non-Western country. This is just a standard story for a lot of different peoples. If you're from Latin America, this is a standard story that you have some variant of in your family history. If you're from the Middle East, you have some variant of this story of a transition from authoritarian, capitalist leaning, maybe some like military dictatorships in there, the fight for democracy. And I bring this up because, like, yes, obviously America is here trying to end the democracy in Venezuela, but also we're in America trying to fight for our democracy. And I would just like to remind all of the Americans watching that this is the standard practice, like the default in life is fight for democracy. The default in life is not you are provided democracy. Everywhere in the world, people have to fight like Ditso, like Ditso's family, like my family, like many, many, many others' family, to ever achieve it. And that's a thing that we need to never forget, and we entirely have, whereas they haven't.
So, yes, and in that sense, that's my upbringing. Of course, there's other historical elements that help me maintain that. For example, 166 years ago, we had an invasion of U.S. citizens led by William Walker in the Costa Rica, Nicaragua region, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica region, that they came to invade us. Also, they invaded Mexico and they set up momentarily the Republic of Sonora. That's another part of the influence that I have as a political operator in that sense. So, go back to the Venezuela situation. So the Pérez Jiménez, the second military regime, and you're wondering why second? Because the first military regime in last century was actually Vicente Gómez in the 30s. Right on the moment where all that upheaval was happening, we had in Venezuela a military regime that fell down. Then we had a period of like, okay, we're getting back up from a military regime, and then
the
boom.
One country in the world that was recovering from a military dictatorship in the lead up to World War II rather than like descending into one.
And actually it was right in the middle of World War II. It was between 42 and 43 that we started recuperating, and Vicente Gómez fell. So
That's
Vicente
wild.
Gómez had about 10 years of dictatorship. So anyhow, on this second regime of Pérez Jiménez, it falls. Democracy comes back. Romulo Gallegos comes back, the father of this refounding of Venezuela's democracy. But from the period of 58 to 99, you had the period of bipartisan politics, where you had two major political parties controlling the whole thing. Now, to understand Venezuela, it's quite simple. It's like the United States. Venezuela is a constitutional federal republic, and still is to today, which means Venezuela has 24 states, and it has a federal government. All those states function exactly like in the United States. Yes, you have a centralized federal power, but you have a decentralized administrative constitutional right for those states to do what they do best, as long
Exist
as they
and
can,
govern themselves, yeah.
govern themselves. So understanding that concept and what happened during that period leads you to that moment um, of of um, of the change of a regime in '99. However, there
And
are
mind you, just to like add in, because after that change in '99, after like the democracy being returned to Venezuela, the Venezuela was an ally of the United States for quite a while. That's literally why they have F-16s. We only really stopped having positive relations with Venezuela right around the time of like the Obama administration, when there was the shale oil boom in the United States, and we were significantly less reliant on positive relations with Venezuela, who has the I believe actually the world's largest oil stores. And also required American refineries, because Venezuelan oil is far thicker and is harder to refine than like crude oil from like the Middle East, for example. So there is a coinciding there.
To understand this situation of this period, ending on 58 and beginning with from 58 to 44 in Venezuela. There are several names you have to at least handle. One of them would be Lucinchi. One of them would be one famous name that in Venezuela we just call him Cap, or we used to call him Cap, which is Carlos Andres Perez. He was president twice in Venezuela. Rafael Caldera, who was president twice in Venezuela. Then maybe, yeah, we could have the conversation of Octavio Lepage, but that's another conversation. But those two major names, Carlos Andres Perez and Rafael Caldera, Carlos Andres Perez representing the Acción Democrática, or Democratic Action, aka Democratic Party in Venezuela, and Rafael Caldera, which was actually the COPEI party, or the Republican Party. COPEI standing for the Social Christian Political Party. So it gets to be confusing.
Yeah, you see my face when I hear religious party. It's just
yeah, no.
I don't even know if this guy was like good or not. It's Christian makes me think twice though.
The Republican Party, the modern day MAGA Republican Party, is an amalgamation of pseudo social Christian authoritarian approach. So this is the interesting part. When you speak to a Latin American and you are a U.S. citizen who's only lived the reality of U.S. citizen, you do not realize that your definitions of politics are like the imperial metric system, outdated. That's a conversation to have. For example, here
we were chatting about this earlier today, between like liberal and conservative and left and, exactly. And right even.
And it's even far more, because the reality of political ideologies is that it's a spectrum. So you have from liberal progressive to liberal conservatives, but still liberal. They function under the liberalism. The same thing with the Marxists, or the leftists, or the castristas, or the chavistas. Those different variations, Sendero Luminoso, etc. You have.
Yeah, we're too dumb in America. We just give it two names. You're either a lib or you're not. That's it. That's all.
Now here we do tend to understand that. Well, many of us understand that. That's better. But going back to this point, I was digressing. So, this era of that period of 40 some odd years was a period where, yeah, Venezuela had an economic boom that was dependent on the oil, and then that boom fell. Why? Because of the oil crisis in the 70s. That's when Carlos Andrés Perez was elected for the first time, and he nationalized oil. It was not until 70s that oil became nationalized in Venezuela. So it's a myth that the current government or Chavismo was the one to nationalize oil. No, that happened at least
Ish.
30 years before them.
And that's what led to the deteriorations of like relations with the United States anyway.
That began it into it. So what's interesting in this sense is that you see a country that had and has the very similar characteristics of what is happening to the United States. It became a country that was polarized on two fronts, where the exchange or systematic exchange of power only made that the bureaucracy became lazy, became incapable of responding to the needs of the people. It became corrupt. But
and it
corruption
became incapable of stopping a coup, an insurrection,
Exactly.
which is like I've made this point before. Part of the reason why Trump hates Maduro so much is because they're the same guy. Like it's the same reason Trump hates Erdogan. It's because they're the same guy. They are both strongmen with a large ego, and they both feel like they are deserving of the bending of the knee of the other. Oh, and just quick update while we're talking about this, because I'm just seeing this now. As of about 2 hours ago, the USS Iwo Jima and her Arleigh Burke class destroyer Escort were spotted 124 miles from the Venezuelan island of La Orchida. So like, there's some stuff going on. Like they're moving in closer, which wasn't the case just a couple hours ago. So I just wanted to give that update while we were at it.
Isla Orchia.
Yeah.
I've been there. I went there. My father was very fond of fishing. Since I was a kid, he taught me how to hunt. He taught me how to fish. So, anyhow, yeah. So this whole perspective is to understand. Okay, Venezuela ended up on a situation very similar to the United States, and with the interesting exception that Chavez was not a civilian; he was a military colonel, and he attempted two coups, failed those two coups, got arrested, got pardoned, and then he utilized the same system that was very broken to gain the power. He was elected by a majority. So he changed the Constitution in 99, which is funny because, yes, he changed the Constitution, but he maintained the Constitution. If that makes sense, make it make sense. How is it that a man that professes such Marxist point of view maintained a liberal constitutional, at least in the basic structure of the state? It maintained a constitutional federal republic. It maintained division of power. It clearly established means of control, etc. So yes, you would say that it was incorporating aspects of socialism into a liberal constitution, but that was nothing new, because out of the 100 and some odd constitutions in the last 125 years in Latin America, that was a standard. He was not doing something new. He was just copying models that were already well established throughout either Costa Rica, the changes in the Mexican constitutions, etc., etc., etc. There are the changes in Argentinian constitution, etc. So this whole experiment that happened led to a authoritarian government that eventually took control of everything. So this goes to today. But here's the interesting part. You know, at the turn of century, we saw something in Latin America which was interesting, a change of pendulum. You had the government of Chavez, then eventually Evo Morales, Rafael Correa. Eventually, you had Lula da Silva, Dilma Rousseff in Brazil. You had, you had the situation in Peru with the change of Fujimori. It's been a mess in Peru. It's another whole story.
It's been a mess all over the place in Latin America, and that's almost entirely our fault, you know?
And yeah, we'll touch on that point right now, but I just want to give that perspective. So you had this upheaval of leftist inclined governments happening throughout Latin America. This changed in the last 15 years, that then you saw movements more towards the right with give you an example, with these...
Milei in Argentina is a good one.
Milei is the most recent example, but you had the examples of Bukele being elected in El Salvador. You had the examples of
going back to like the 70s.
Hold on, not Santos from Colombia. The one prior to that, what was his name? Uribe, Álvaro Uribe. That was an example that happened prior to even Milei, in that sense, where you saw that change pendulum again to a liberal conservative ground, and not a liberal progressive leftist type of aspect. But what is funny is that if you analyze the realities of the leftism in Latin America, they were extremely conservative, at least in subjects of abortion, of LGBTIQ rights, and one of the things I work most in drug policy. So this takes me to this point that I wanted to make, to first break out the lie. Venezuela, in the last 5 years, even under a leftist government, from 2020 or 2020 to 2024 to 2024, if you use Gregorian, captured 63 tons of drugs. Just in the last 6 months of this year, 51 tons of drugs were captured by the Venezuelan government or regime. And you see this,
almost none of it's produced in Venezuela.
In fact, yeah. If we look at the transit of drugs to the United States from Latin America, particularly if you look at pixie powder. Let's just keep it PG-13. Everybody knows what I mean by pixie powder, right? So
I'll say cocaine.
There we go.
The president loves to do it. We can say it.
The things about policies here at YouTube, which it's another conversation.
Oh no, it's okay. The king loves it, so YouTube will be fine.
So, the transit of cocaine, the majority, or 70 to 80% of that, mobilized through the Pacific. So that's a matter of fact, and I can bring all the information that you want to prove the fact that the majority of mobilization of cocaine towards the United States happened through the Pacific, because it's a more straight shot. Why is it a more straight shot? Just look at a map. Anybody?
It'll be like it just makes more sense. Obviously,
it makes more sense. And anywhere between 15-20% of the mobilization of drugs happened throughout the Caribbean. In that sense, of course, the majority of cocaine comes from the Andino countries, which are the Bolivia, Peru, Colombia. So if you look at the location of that, out of those three countries, only 2 have access to an ocean. That would be Colombia to the Atlantic and Bolivia to the Pacific.
And Colombia is where like the vast majority of the cocaine that's consumed in the United States is produced, based on like the DEA's numbers at the very least. That's 93%. So, I just want to show like that link you sent me, just to talk about like the boats for a second, because we're talking about bombing boats, right? Like we bombed, what is it, like 8 or 9 boats that we're calling drug boats now. First of all, like anyone with a brain understands that this is not an intelligent way to smuggle drugs. Loading 14 people onto a boat is, first of all, less room for the drugs that you're smuggling. Secondly, we live in 2025. There are satellites everywhere. Now, one of the things, in fact, we have one instance of one of these already being found, was a submersible, a submarine used to smuggle drugs. Now, based on the numbers that come from the United States themselves, since 2013, as in this mode of transportation, the submersibles, has only increased since 2013. Drug trafficking along the route from Colombia, which produces 93% of the cocaine consumed in the U.S., to Central America and Mexico, increased by 10% since 2013. And from there, shipments are smuggled into the U.S. According to the DEA, this corridor now accounts for an estimated 93% of cocaine traffic from South America to North America, compared to 7% for the route that uses the Caribbean islands. But beyond that, what you then find is that the vast majority of this trafficking that is done through water is done through submarines. The development and widespread adoption of GPS has allowed drug traffickers to introduce further innovations. One method, for example, involves filling torpedo-shaped containers like submersibles, but this time unmanned, with drugs, and this container is attached to a buoy and a signal transmitter. It can hold up to 7 tons of cocaine secured to the bottom of a ship by a cable. If the ship is intercepted, it can simply drop the container into a greater depth. But beyond that, why even use a boat when the submarines are available? In fact, if you take a look later on in this article, it'll tell you exactly where, actually, I didn't realize I didn't even have the article on the screen, but I suppose it doesn't even matter now, where the submarine tech even came from. Initially, like the submersibles that the cartels from Colombia, not Venezuela, have used to smuggle drugs into the United States, originated from the Tamils in Sri Lanka, the Tamil Tiger rebel group, who then later sold the technology or provided it to the Colombians, specifically because it was fast, quiet, and cheap, and made of readily available materials. So when we're talking about consistent bombing of surface vessels, not only does this not add up with geography, not only does this not add up with, like, the math of where those drugs actually originate from, not only does it not add up with common sense tactics of, I don't know, if you wanted to smuggle drugs, how would you do it? Not to say that, like, you know, we don't advocate for crime committing on this channel or this platform, but if you were hypothetically going to consider it, you would likely choose the option that is safer, right? Kind of like the same argument we make of, like, when we talk about the Mexican drug cartels. No shit, undocumented Mexican immigrants are not smuggling drugs across the border. If you were going to try and smuggle drugs across the border into the US, why would you not pick a white person who would be far less scrutinized at that border? It's just common sense. So it's the M word and nothing less.
And completely agreed on that.
Murder.
And now that you mentioned fentanyl, if you look at what the DEA was telling us, and it's an institution I dislike, but the majority of fentanyl is crossing the Pacific from China to either Mexico and then to United States, or either directly to the United States. And then you'll have to talk about the precursors of fentanyl. You would have to talk about that some of those precursors can be obtained directly in the United States through mail service. And if the excuse of the Donald Trump regime is that, we're going to Venezuela to fight against the fentanyl, and these extrajudicial killings and murders that were committed by the military operation, which has already suffered consequences. You've already had 3 major generals and high-level people.
We also hit the wrong country's boat.
Exactly. So it is undoubtedly, and I know that the MAGA is gonna really hate this, but I come from 2 cultures. One that had military, and the other one that abolished military. And I always stick with the one that abolished military because that was the wisest move that we could do. Military is the most anti-democratic institution that you could have. And in the zoo,
it doesn't help when you brainwash them too. Specifically, yeah.
Exactly.
You're not wrong.
So at this point, we see that the excuse of fentanyl breaks down. Even the own institutions, the main institution focused on the drug issue, tells you that fentanyl from Venezuela is 0%. Fentanyl does not come from Venezuela.
Two big
Coming
things
from
on
China,
the fentanyl issue
India,
really quickly.
and crossing through the Pacific in most circumstances on the powerful sense, or it is being fabricated within Mexico or in the United States. So if the regime of Donald Trump had such interest in fighting against the drug trafficking, why doesn't he focus on his own citizens that are part of the cartels and that they have their own cartels inside the United States?
Oh, yes. Well, like 3 points on this. First off, actually, 4 points. The chat loves you, Dan. You should plug your channel because they're asking for it. But I would like to remind you all that it was like 6 months ago that it was this regime, this Trump regime, that claimed that Mexican drug cartels had infiltrated the Canadian government and were overrunning Canada, smuggling fentanyl from the northern border into the United States. That this was a real thing that was said. I would also like to remind you that if we had any issue with, I don't know, like the Mexican drug cartels, we could just stop selling them 73% of their guns. And then on top of that, I would also like to remind you that all of the opiate epidemic is Purdue Pharmaceuticals and the Sacklers' fault anyway, and all of those people were let off the hook, and none of them will ever face a day in prison. So, like, we don't give two fucks about solving this problem. This is about picking an enemy because the fascist needs an eternal war. Now, like, I could come up with a real justification. Like, in fact, like, I'd like to hear your response to this one, Ditso. I, who does not, like, it was not a person who wants to go to war with Venezuela. If I really tried, could come up with some justification that at the very least makes a little bit of sense. Not to say that it would justify it, but I could say China hosts satellite technology that is used to spy on U.S. troop movements in Venezuela. And because we're in a Cold War with China, we must force, like, Venezuela to remove the... Like, you could just make up a better argument, and it still wouldn't be good enough, but we're not even doing that. Like, we're not trying.
And let's be real. And you're going to see how I wrap on this. And to tell others, I'm sorry, this is the only thing I have on YouTube. I have not loaded any videos because my work demands a lot of my time. I work in my community, in my close community, as well as the indigenous communities of my people, Afro-Indigenous communities, as well as Afro-descendancy of slavery here in Costa Rica, as well as through Panama, Colombia, etc. So I spend a lot of my time from local to macro, trying to resolve the issues, going to different things. I'll give you an example. My mother, who's almost 80 years old, she's a lawyer, and on the place we live, there has been a lot of conflict in regards of the urban development that is happening on the place where I mostly live, close to my mother. And my mother, at 80 years old, went because she, like me, is extremely activist, and she went to the local council to tell them, "You're idiots. I've told you this over the past 25 years that we have serious problems of unmitigated urban development that is affecting our mountain ranges, that is impacting the water sources, and I brought geologists here, etc." So this is for the people I learned. My mother, at 80 years old, where she should be retired and just chilling her life, is fighting a political life. That's what we do. That's how
that
we're
is
supposed
democracy.
to be.
That is democracy.
So, and look, I've been shot at twice. Twice they tried to take my life. They failed. I lived
Think
through
we'll
a
try
military
again?
coup. I lived through a military coup. I saw my father, who was the Rock, somebody who, before that moment, I always saw somebody who was a Rock show me fear for the first time, and fear like very few people in this world have even felt. And I've lived with that fear as a reminder that democracy has to be fought for every single millisecond of your life.
I have a question for you, Dan Ditso. How much of your fighting for democracy from a military dictatorship took place with entirely non-violent weekend protests alone? How successful do you think that would have been?
It's a mixture of things. Um, Let me put it in a very simple way.
I know, sorry, I put you on the spot there with that
No,
one.
no, no, no. It's actually a good question. The way the regimes fall is a combination of knowing what you have to do and taking the risks you have to take in order to set the whole thing up and contribute for that fall of that regime, as well as the necessary steps to continue the systematic pressure. See, one thing you learn on a constant state of revolution is that you must not sacrifice the innocents, because if you do, you become worse than your enemies.
Infinitely. Like, at that point, you might as well give up.
So, in that sense, you have to learn to balance that not everything is going to be violence and not everything is going to be non-violence. That this form of constant and systematic vigilance to secure independence, to secure freedom, to secure liberty is a route that is constantly and systematically going between the spectrum of violence and nonviolence.
There are always new avenues opening as others close. It is a shifting battlefield. I really just want all of the people who are doomering about how cooked we are to take a look at someone who was also equally as cooked and is still here. Are they still cooked? Hell yeah, they're still cooked, but they're still here. And
Chile was
that's
cooked, and look what happened with Pinochet. Fujimori,
that's
look
true.
at what happened with Fujimori. Look, if since we're able to prove that the excuse of drugs is a lie from the Trump administration and they're lying to you, then what remains? What is the interest of going into Venezuela? Of course, you got your political location. Somebody in the prior panel that I was talking about said, "Well, it's a strategic position of they could, Russia, China use it to attack us, etc." But it's like, dude, the difference between Venezuela and Cuba is that Venezuela is 4,500 kilometers from United States. Cuba was
The answer for this is far simpler than most people are making it. The most common answer I hear is natural resources. Their oil. We don't need Venezuela's oil. We got our own. We want their resources. Now, don't get me wrong. We'll take them. That's not why we're doing this. The only real reason for this, in fact, we even said it. The Pentagon said it. I covered it on stream. The reason for this is because we're scared of Russia and China. We put out a memo saying we are going to shift away from a aggressive position in Europe against Russia and as much of an aggressive position in the Pacific against China. We're going to try and leave that up a bit more to our allies in the region. Of course, we'll assist and support, but we're going to focus far more on our backyard, our region. Because, first of all, we are cutting, like, we might be increasing our military funding, but that's not making our military stronger. All of that increase in funding is just extra money that goes into the pockets of the defense contractors. There is a forever war necessary in every fascist dictatorship. All of them. It is required to keep the population fueled and afraid enough to be zealotrous. But then beyond that, we also just like suffering. Like, if you haven't noticed, the whole point here of everything that we do is suffering. The suffering is the point. Hell, look at the way that we're talking about this, just for a little bit of extra context. Speaking earlier in the White House about recent strikes by the U.S. Against drug boats operated by the cartels, quote unquote, in Venezuela.
Are like 5% of what they were a year ago, less than 5%. So now they're coming in by land, and even the land is concerned because I told them that's going to be next. You know, the land is going to be next, and we may go to the Senate, we may go to the Congress and tell them about it, but I coming in by sea.
It cuts off there. The end of that sentence is, but I don't really think we'll need to. We'll just kill them. Like, the point is just, let's just make something.
No, look at this. We're what, 3 years away from the end of this of the constitutional mandate. If he does not then break the Constitution and go for the third mandate, but let's just say, for argument's sake, that we're almost done with the Trump administration. If we grab the first administration and this second administration, and look at the numbers of drug consumption in the United States, I'll put $100 down that there has not been any change whatsoever. That people are still consuming drugs in the United States in the same quantity that they had been prior to Donald Trump. So this whole, yeah, I'm being rhetorical because I know the answer to that question. But anyhow,
I know. But like, yeah.
And please do fact check me. You'll see that the and this is coming from NIHA data is telling us that the consumption of drugs have remained pretty much stable in the last 25 years throughout the United States.
Yeah, you're right. Essentially, like, very little difference. 1% here, 2% here, back and forth.
So here's the question. If the notion of Donald Trump is, we're attacking the boats that are coming directly from Central America, etc., then we should see a high decrease of consumption of drugs in the United States. But by the end of this administration, it's going to be a insignificant change. Maybe
I'd argue we're going to say an increase in drug use.
We're going to see an increase.
I'd argue we'll see a massive increase in drug use because we're seeing a massive increase in poverty.
So let's just face it. In this matter, the war on drug is, since the Nixon era and the last 14 presidents have been 14. Wait, yeah, no. Nixon, Ford.
God damn, yeah, it's been a while.
Anyhow, 12, 14 presidents. I may be incorrect on the quantity of presidents, but from Nixon to today, if anybody in the chat or you can correct me, I'm not sure if it was 12 or 14 presidents since Nixon. If anybody can confirm that. I like being very precise on my things, but I got a lot of information up here, and then sometimes I make my mistakes. I'm not infallible. However, we see that for the past 66, 67 years since the Nixon era, the United States took advantage of globalization and via the United Nations, through the 3 international courts, made a one-rule-fits-all in matters of drugs. And the funny thing is that leftist governments like Correa, like Mujica, like not Mujica actually broke that, Correa, Chavez, Maduro, etc. They became hell resistant in regards of that of applying that policy. So here's the thing: the real reason of why United States has this fascination now with Venezuela has to do with, one, the deep fear they have of the influence of China and Russia in Latin America, which is also negative. Don't get me wrong. I will not support either China, Russia, or United States. None of these imperialist countries are beneficial.
Well, take a look at Africa, and you can see the exact point that you're making. Yeah, we left, and has it got better? No.
So, exactly. So that point of that fear. Second, obviously, the idea of, oh, we need more resources, so we're gonna build this whole psyop type of thing, blah blah. But the third reason, see, this is the thing. While we can recognize that United States influence and systematic interventionism into our issues in Latin America have made our shit worse, that does not exempt from the fact that we internally have also fucked up our own countries, making wrong decisions. So the combination of the arrogance of Destiny Manifest or Destiny Manifest 2.0
yeah.
and our own internal issues have made the combination for a perfect storm. So this is something that, pundits from the right don't understand when they try to talk to me, which, they don't last long. They don't last this long on this type of conversation with me. Today, Bisora is letting me go in many ways, and I'm here talking to you in my secondary language. If I were speaking Spanish, I would be speaking faster and more precise. In English, is a bit more, I have to be more, but anyhow, I digress. The point being here, in my dear chat and my dear audience in that sense, is that the third reason, like I said, fear of China, influence of China and Russia in our region, the natural resources, and the third reason is that you got some stupid asses in my country desperate,
begging for it.
Begging for it. And I can understand that. They're desperate. It's been 25 years and it's been hard. But like I told them, and I've told them several times in different levels, fuck that. We don't need the United States. We don't need anybody. We've already lived through two major military regimes, and we brought them down by ourselves. We can do this by ourselves. We can make the.
Can you tell them from me to take Maria Machado and then throw her into the ocean? Because that might help.
Look, Maria Corina Machado, which is the most recent figure of that opposition, contrary to what happened with Leopoldo Lopez, Capriles. This is the interesting thing about the opposition in Venezuela. People don't understand. You have an amalgamation between leftist progressives, conservative liberals, conservative conservatives, and everything in between. So it is extremely hard to reach consensus when you have so many chefs in the kitchen trying to do souffle.
Sounds pretty similar to the same exact issue we're facing right now, actually. Like, so, even like in America now, we have conservatives, like taking a look at like No King's Day. There was a bunch of Republicans that came out, but they still disagree fundamentally on everything that we want, but now they're on our side against the Nazi, and now so we have to figure out a way to come to like a common ground that we're never going to, because those are the people that voted in the Nazi, unless they're willing to like secede to our point of view. And it's that same issue that goes on and on and on in every other place. It really is like a global right-wing psyop on making sure that nobody can work together.
Yeah, actually, this is the interesting part. The PSYOP works to destabilize movements because the own movement, and it's something people have to understand, when you're working in the long arch of social justice, you're also pedaling and you're also rowing against egocentrisms, the ego of individuals. You're working against the ignorance of others. You're working against your own biases and your own fears that you may develop throughout time. You're also juggling the fact that if you have a family, you have to take care of that family. and so many
Like-
other factors.
And the fascist makes use of this. They make it so you are working harder to take care of your family. They put out fear regularly so that you are afraid for not just yourself, but your friends and your family when you speak out. I'm more afraid for the people that I care about than I am for my own safety. And that is a method of creating self-censorship. This is like, these are the conversations I wish we were having so much more often, which is why I'm so happy that you came on to have this conversation, Dan Ditso, because Americans have such a narrow view of the political playing field because of the blinders that have been forced on. Like, for example, you have traveled through multiple different Latin American countries on the same mission, on the same fight, on the same you're operating politically in all of these different countries. When I tell Americans, some of the Americans who are experienced in fighting fascism should potentially leave the United States and go to other nations in which we are attempting to export currently our current brand of fascism, I get faced with accusations of you're being defeatist. But it has nothing to do with being defeatist. It's thinking critically and strategically, because the battlefield will shift. The United States on like the home turf, just like how Venezuela on the home turf in that case would be one place where you need a group of people fighting against the authoritarian. But you also need somebody in Costa Rica, you need somebody in Colombia, you need somebody in Guyana, you need someone in Brazil, you need somebody in America, in France, in the UK, in Australia, in Germany. We need that conversation to be as broad and spread out and decentralized as possible. You're not going to, and this is why I asked you the question earlier of like, have you ever seen an authoritarian dictatorship fall from a weekend gathering of mass protest? No, because there's more to it than that required here.
And just to shout out Boncourt, yes, from Nixon up to today, there has been 10 presidents, 5 have been Democrat, and 5 have been Republican in the United States.
And Trump has been
half,
2 of them.
most. And Trump has been 2 of them. Well, Obama has been 2 of them. But anyhow, yeah.
Also was Bush, actually.
I think, and taking that point that you were saying and applying it to the things I have lived. Look, the same things that people like you and I, who are operators of politics beyond ideologies, and that we're able to incorporate forms of ideology into not being a goal, but tools to reach goals, we have to realize that the fascists, the conservatives, so whatever name they are calling themselves today, nowadays, MAGA, whatever, are facing exactly the same problems that we are facing. We see it today with MAGA. MAGA is internally in constant turmoil. They're not united. They're extremely separated. The assassination of Charlie Kirk demonstrated this in many ways. And in Venezuela, as well as different examples that I can bring up, the Fujimori situation, how Fujimori fell, or how Videla in Argentina fell, the issues with Perón, then afterwards, with the issues of in Venezuela with the fall of Vicente Gomez, and then the fall of Pérez Jiménez, with the situations in Colombia, which actually is an interesting story. I could go into Colombia a whole bunch, but just suffice to say that with the assassination of this presidential candidate in '48, what was his name? I keep on forgetting his name. I always remember the parallel case that was happening in that time frame, which was the lawyer who killed his own clients in Colombia, And then I remember the name of the presidential candidate that was assassinated because that happened relatively at the same time in Bogota. Hold on. Let me. This is the problem
That is
when
an
you have so
insane
much
thing.
information in your head that certain things. Um,
Slip through and are harder to grasp, which is what the fascist demands that all of us, waste our time brain rotting on TikTok so that we can't have these conversations.
and I'm not
While you
talking
look
about
that up,
the one killed in the 90s. Very similar to Donaldo Colosio that happened in Mexico. I'm talking about the Luis Carlos Galán. Luis Carlos Galán. There we go. Luis Carlos Galán, the assassination of Carlos Galán in Colombia in 48, which initiated the whole turmoil of the last 60 years, especially with the, now defunct FARC, now called the ELN, which is an interesting history in that sense. But the point being here is that, sorry, I have to be precise when I talk, and if I forget a name, I have to go find it in order to provide the correct information. But anyhow, the example of Colombia, with the growth of the FARC, the fight of the last 60 some odd years, then the agreement, the attempts of agreement of peace, the separation of that FARC, then to the ELN, or the Ejército de Liberación Nacional, or the National Liberation Army. It gives you those examples, going back to this point of conversation that we were having, that movements are not a fixed thing, and that the spectrum of social justice and political activism is faced with a lot of things. That takes us back to that question. Does a military regime or a dictatorship, either military or a combination of military, civil, or civil coming from a civil elected aspect dictatorship, falls only by protests on the streets? No. But protests on the streets are like the necessary soil in order for things to
the
evolve.
sapling to take root and to grow. Exactly. Look, I have a good way to simplify this, and I'm going to do that in the form of a riddle from a book of one of my favorites, A Clash of Kings. And the question really here is, where does power lie? So here's the riddle. In a room sit three great men, a king, a priest, and a rich man with his gold. Between them stands a sellsword, a little man of common birth and no great mind. Each of the great ones bids him to slay the other two. Do it, says the king, for I'm your lawful ruler. Do it, says the priest, for I command you in the name of the gods. Do it, says the rich man, and all of this gold shall be yours. So who do you think lives and who dies? Well, the real answer to this riddle is that there is no real answer to this riddle. Power lies where people think it lies. The sellsword is the one with the power. The sellsword is the one that gets to decide which of the two die and which of the three live. You are the sellsword, and you are being told by the king, by the priest, and by the rich man to do three different things. And none of them are for what you need. And all of them are assuming that you're not going to think about the fact that you're the one standing there with the sword in your hand. And none of them are. So you have power.
Let me share a story. 15 years ago, 2010 or 2010, when the first moment I came out publicly saying we need to legalize cannabis or marijuana, and we need to reform our drug policy. Drug policy is a failure. We had here in Costa Rica, we had conveyed a social gathering to expose our points, etc., in near the Legislative Congress, the main building of Legislative Congress, in a little place on a park that is near that, called the Plaza de la Democracia, or the Democracy Park. It's an urban park. When we arrived there, we were probably 30, 40 people. You know, it was the first time the news picked it up. It was, you know, the whole upheaval. And they sent me two, not one, two anti-riot forces that included a riot force usually includes anywhere between 15 to 30 men are ready to control riots, you know. So in total, to control 40 people, they sent about 60 cops. Guy comes up and says, "This is an illegal gathering of criminals. This is contrary to the Constitution." And I turned to him, tell him, you know, if this is contrary to the Constitution, then you yourself are acting against your own oath. And the guy points the gun at me, a cop. I'm telling you, a cop. And I tell him, well, if I'm going to die today, go for it. Are you going to shoot an unarmed man who's showing you your hands? Are you such a degenerate imbecile? Or
That's
are
the
you
right
acting
answer.
upon the orders of the current president, who was a woman at that time? So I called her. I do apologize for that, but I did call her the degenerate bitch imbecile who's in power.
I mean, I wouldn't apologize for that. I would have called her a
But
degenerate.
anyhow, no, I was being facetious about the apology, trying to be cordial. But anyhow, the point being is that they came and they started hitting us. When the guy lowered his gun and gave the order, everybody advanced. They tried to arrest me, but a couple of the people that were there, put their bodies in front of me. I was pissed off it because I wanted a piece of that. Yes, like I told you, you learn when to be nonviolent and when to respond to defend yourself. Rule number one I have in my life is I never throw the first punch.
See, a distinction that I think also requires making here is that there is a difference between nonviolent resistance, violent resistance, and non-nonviolent resistance. Non-nonviolent resistance is not violent resistance. It's resistance that reserves the right to protect yourself. And there is a very, very big difference between that and intentional violent resistance.
And this wasn't not my first time on this. 10 years prior to that, at the age of 17, 18, when I first reached university, you can look it up. Look up Combo de Lice, Costa Rica. Combo, the COMBO, de Lice, Costa Rica. This was a major social protest that happened at the turn of the century because there was a project to privatize our electrical as well as our communication grids in Costa Rica. And I was part of, the Federation of Students in the Costa Rica University. I wasn't part of the directive or anything. I was just a 17-year-old kid who came in and said, how can I help? And on that time, I remember this. It was in April. It was almost 2 weeks of pure and systematic protest where I slept in the university. I never returned home. The only time I returned home once, I had a cop car, unmarked near my home, trying to find me. So I had to go pick up clothes, and because the place I used to live back then, I knew how to move around, and I lost the tail. But anyhow, the point being is, it wasn't my first experience on 2010 when I came out with a drug policy. It was actually my fifth or sixth experience of knowing how to face cops. Hell, I've
take it from people who've been in this fight for decades.
Yeah,
y'all.
I've
there's
already,
so much you can do.
I've already eaten enough tear gas because on that April of 12,000, we were, to explain it this way, if you go to the University of Costa Rica, it's in the San Pedro region on the west side of San Jose. Well, near reaching that area of the University of Costa Rica, there's a famous roundabout called I hate the name of it, but the Fuente de la España, or the fountain of Hispanic, which I hate that term, but anyhow. And we have that area blocked. That's one of the major routes in order to continue west or go northwest or go southwest towards other points of the capital in that sense. So we had that blocked. I remember this so well. By the south side of this roundabout, there's a cemetery. Me and a buddy, we were responsible of that day maintaining the south side as blocked as possible. I had about 30, 40 people there. So my friend tells me, hey, look, the cars are starting to move farther away. And I said, oh, I know what's coming. So I tell everybody, get ready, get your handkerchiefs, get the salt beneath your eyes, everything ready, they're coming. We knew that the rioters, the riot police was coming. So,
side note: invest in a gas mask if you can. So,
yeah, well,
I mean, like for today, that was decades.
Yeah. At that time, I should have done that, but I was a 17-year-old kid.
Or just a side note for like the today times, like you can go grab a gas mask for like $15.
Exactly. So in that sense, the cops, we saw the movement because they usually use, the Roman type of line where they are interlocked between each other with the shields and all the stuff. So when I come up to the cop and tell him, hey, look, we're unarmed, etc. 17 years old, and that's the first time a cop points the gun at my head, and I'm like, I put my hands up, and at 17 years old, I did not know what to say. The only thing I said is, asshole, if you shoot me, I will haunt your family. There's no God. You are not a Christian.
Nice.
Go suck a cock. That's the only thing I could think of at that moment.
Well, I mean, that's the correct answer. Also, just a reminder to everybody that it was this week that a scenario almost exactly like that occurred in Chicago, except it was a paramedic who just loaded a patient into an ambulance who had their life threatened by an ICE agent with a gun drawn at their face, saying, I will shoot you. So, just reminding y'all there. There's a lot of similarities with what we are experiencing daily in modern America and what you live through, Ditso. Also, thank you for proving the point that I've been screaming at the top of my lungs for a year now. When you got a giant group to protest, don't clump up in like 100,000 in one area. Go break off into 20, 30 person groups and go occupy a street. Go take like 2 or 3 and patrol it. Go have your friends occupy 2 or 3 down that way. Take the whole city and have people on every single block. Every last one of them. And that way, it's a lot harder to stop all of you, for one, exactly. But it's a lot harder for them to do their job.
And the funny thing is, so the cop lowers his gun and says the usual thing, this is an illegal, blah, 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 anti-constitutional meeting. You have to, break away, blah, blah. And we say, no, we're not going to go anywhere. And they start advancing. They gave the order and they started advancing. When those riots start advancing, they start hitting the back of the shield. So you hear in unison, boom, a dry sound coming towards you. So me and like 5 or 6 more guys, we do a human shield. We knew that we had people that we needed to get the hell out fast. But at the same time, we knew we had people that were ready to lay down on the floor and marvel and whatever happens, we get trampled upon. So we're moving us backwards, them here. I remember vividly one of the cops going like this, almost at me, but he misses because I'm moving myself a bit forward, and he hits the person right behind me. I feel the blood hit the back of my head. I can't turn around because I'm interlocked with my other bodies. So the only thing I can think of is kick.
You do what you can.
I kick, I shield. And what happens? That shield rebounds me back, obviously. So I'm here being held, kind of falling off of my feet. Then all hell broke loose because they started throwing the tear gas.
Yeah.
The tear gas hits me right here. One hits me here, the other one hits me here. I fall back, kind of convoluted. I remember all this because then one of my friends takes off my shirt and puts a whole bucket of water on my face.
Yeah, because you can get like physical burns from that.
Yeah.
Like in fact, there was an instance of this happening just like
I
this
still
week
have it.
in Chicago.
I still have it.
And like for a second, Singing Way. He's describing his very committed life as an activist. I would like to ask him what advice does he have for us in our current U.S. predicament? Our system is dismantled. Money controls our Congress. This is the exact same situation that like Ditso described having had existed in Costa Rica, in Colombia, in Venezuela. In like this is always the case. Our situation in the United States right now is functionally no different than any of the other like situations that Ditso's described personally experiencing. The only like in fact, it's so little of a difference because the dictatorships in those cases were also supported by us and funded by us. It's the same group of people. It's the same moneyed interests that are being fought against. Now we are almost out of time, Ditso. So before we run out, I really did want to say thank you for coming on because this has been an enlightening conversation, and I think that we really needed to have this. I'd happily have you back on for more anytime. You are always welcome here as a friend of the channel, and you are absolutely like in the base department, officially a member of the base department, as Latina Mafune has said. Everyone, like, please do not give up hope. Has Ditso given up hope? Do you still hope, mate?
I'm a stubborn son of a gun. And well, if they would like to have me, and if people would like to, you know, I could do a show here once a week. I could commit that once a week, and sit down and talk about, you know, historical
that's a lovely
realities, politics.
We'll see what can make happen there.
I can educate over, you know, the semantics of the words, how to identify, you know, fallacies, how to grow as movements, what are the best.
Someone's got to do that, and I've got to say, you got a whole lot more patience for that shit than I do. We'll see what can be done. I do know that, like this space wants to be a 24-hour channel where there is always somebody streaming. I don't know about like the particulars on that, but I will ask for you. Absolutely. And other than that, you're literally welcome on my show to do that fucking anytime, mate.
Yeah, exactly. And one last message to everybody out there. No hay mejor pena que la que se sufre andando en camino recto de la vida. There's no better suffering one lives if you're walking straight. So to tell everybody out there, no one expects you to be the front line. No one expects you to be the back line. Be what you can be. Provide what you can provide.
You are just another body on the front, y'all.
Exactly.
And on that front, before we close off, quick little 2 bits of breaking news, both of them horrible. Texas Supreme Court allows judges to refuse to perform same-sex marriages. That is just from today, and the worse and far scarier news. Breaking, Trump signs executive order making it harder for Americans to vote. Signed sweeping set of executive orders overhauling U.S. elections. Move legal experts call the most aggressive voter suppression efforts in modern history. Requiring proof of citizenship, passport, birth certificate before registering to vote. making it so that you can't do mail-in voting, which means I can't vote anymore. Forced states to share voter data with federal agencies. It's all unconstitutional. I'm gonna look into all of that, and I will cover that on my show on my next stream on Monday. But I did feel like that is something y'all should be aware of, considering. But I do hope you all have a happy Halloween tomorrow. Try not to get possessed by too many demons, and if you do, go haunt some MAGA for me. And I suppose that's it. That would be.
Thank you so much for having me, Soda. I'm glad that we finally were able to have a length conversation of you and I on this particular case in the situation of Venezuela. Pura vida, chévere, Beshko Woblava, which means Beshko Woblava means walk with your eyes open in the Bribri language, which is one of the Chifcha languages of the native Central Americans here.
Oh, that I love. Walk with your eyes open. That's advice so many of us need to hear.
Yeah. So, Ewa Beshko Woblava, pura vida.
Hasta luego.
Hasta luego.
Have a lovely, lovely evening.
You too.
All right. And I hope the rest of you all have a lovely evening as well. Don't forget to follow me on YouTube. Drop a like on the stream. You can follow me on Twitch, and you can join the Discord. And if you did want to donate to me, you could use the link in the chat. Very cool. Ditso was amazing. So I will definitely see about having him on more every time I can, guys. Other than that, I hope you all have a lovely, lovely evening and have a happy Halloween.